storms of life to mean various challenges of life. Now, like we established some few weeks ago, is the bitter truth. It is this, is that we cannot do without storms in life. You cannot do without challenges. But we said we have a succor, we have a relief in the book of John chapter 16 verse 33, where Jesus said to us, in this world you will have troubles. In this world you will have pains. But don't worry, I have overcome the world on your behalf. Now this is it. The bitter truth is this, is that we cannot do without storm. There's no immunity against the storms of life. It comes, and when they come, the truth is, how do you face them? How do you walk on troubled waters? If in this passage we are using it figuratively, that Peter walked on the waters. He didn't just walk on ordinary waters. The Bible tells us that something happened. Jesus and his disciples went in the book of Matthew chapter 14. The Bible tells us that immediately Jesus made the disciples. They went, and when they went, they didn't just go there. They went for a ministry work. The Bible said immediately Jesus made the disciples to get into the boats and go on ahead of him to the other side. Now, while he dismissed the crowd, it means they were also on a ministry work. And after they had finished their work, Jesus asked his disciples, okay, we can now go. So they began to move. They began to work. They began to cross to the other side. But the Bible tells us something, that as they were going, Jesus, after he had dismissed the crowd, Jesus didn't just go. The Bible tells us something in verse 23, that after he had dismissed them, he went up on the mountainside by himself. He went there to pray. I like the way the NIV put it. He said he went to a mountainside by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there, what? All alone, not to sleep, but to pray. Now, as this was on, verse 24 tells us that the boat in which the disciples were in, that the boat was already a considerable distance from the land, and it was moving. But something happened. As it was going, there was a very strong wave. These waves came. The wind was so strong. Very, very strong. And in verse 27, the Bible tells us, even in verse 26, that as this was happening, something happened in verse 26. That, you see, Jesus now began to approach the disciples. He was moving towards them. And, you know, when the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. They were scared. And they were wondering, oh, some said it's a ghost. Some said, we can't understand. It's a ghost, oh, and all of those things. And verse 27 tells us that as he approached them, Jesus immediately said to them, take courage. Because as he was coming, there was fear all around them. They were scared and they were thinking, what is this? But Jesus said to them, take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid. And in verse 28, Peter, we know Peter as usual, very courageous, said, well, Jesus, it is you. But if it's you, I want you to do something. He said, tell me to come to you. And Jesus told Peter, he said, come. Come, he said. And in verse 29, Peter got down from the boat and he began to walk on waters. He began to walk on water. Come, he said. And Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came towards Jesus. But something happened in verse 30. And I want you to take note of this very importantly. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and beginning to do what? To sink. Actually, the wind was there before. When Jesus asked him to come, the wind was there. Yes, obviously. Not that the wind was not there. But something happened that when Peter got out of the boat and he began to walk on the waters. He saw the wind. He was afraid. And he began to sing. And in verse 31, immediately that he was sinking, the wind came to him. In verse 30, Peter did something, and I love him. He was not quiet. The Bible tells us Peter cried out, right? He cried out to who? To the master. And he said, help me, right? He cried out. He said, Lord, save me. Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus reached out his hands and caught him. And caught him. Jesus will not let anybody go. He caught him. In every situation of life. Recognize Jesus in every situation of life. For the disciples, it was a mixed up. At the point they didn't remember, they could not even recognize Jesus. But thank God that Jesus A loving father went to them, moved closer to them, and as he was coming, in short, they had doubt. So one of the conditions to walk on waters is for us to be able to recognize Jesus in every situation of life. It does not matter how bad, it does not matter how big, it does not matter how the storms of life, no matter how the condition of that water, no matter how troubled the water is, we must recognize Jesus in every situation of life. The disciples could not even recognize Jesus, not until he came very close to them and they were able to recognize Jesus. Number 3, what other condition do you need to be able to walk on troubled waters? How do you face storms? How do you face challenges? How do you come out of depression? How do you face instability and many more? How do you overcome? One of the conditions is for you to do away with fear, or what I call doubt. Remember what happened to Peter? Peter was walking on the water, but something happened to Peter. Immediately he began to walk on the waters, and fear just came in. Because maybe as he was walking, he saw the wind, and fear or doubt just came in. The Bible tells us that Peter began to sink. Thank God for him that he cried out to Jesus. Please do away with fear and doubt. Be courageous in all that you do. Faith is the opposite of fear. And what faith is to a Christian is what fear is to the devil. If a Christian can use faith to overcome some certain things, obviously the devil can use fear to cripple people. I want to encourage you today that, beloved child of God, please develop your faith. Do away with fear. Do away with doubt. Be courageous. Our Christian philosophy should not be seeing is believing. A lot of times, I'm sure you have heard, seeing is believing. Yes, seeing is believing. We agree. But when you look at faith, faith is not like that. Faith is not based on seeing is believing. In the book of Hebrews chapter 11, if you look at Hebrews 11, you will agree with me that the issue of faith is not based on seeing is believing. No, it's not that. The Bible tells us in Hebrews chapter 11 verse 1 that now faith is confidence in what we hope for, and assurance about what we do not see. So when it comes to the issue of faith, this philosophy of seeing is believing won't just work. Beloved, please do away with fear. The havoc of fear is much. And in the book of Job chapter 3 verse 25, Job is a very good example. He said, what I fear has come upon me. It means before that time, the devil had palpated. You knew that Job was scared. Job was afraid. And he said, what I fear has come upon me. What I feared has come upon me. What I dreaded has happened to me. Beloved, develop your faith. Please do away with fear. Do away with doubt. What else or what other condition do we have to walk on troubled waters? The next, or number 4, is inquire from God concerning your challenge. When God looks for a partner, he looks for people who ask questions, people who want to know, people who are weak but want to know. God is interested in such. In the book of Judges chapter 6, you remember a man there called Gideon, where he hid and the angels appeared. The Bible tells us that when the angel said, oh, behold you, he said, me. He began to ask questions. God, how can it be that I'm the least and many more? You see, Peter asked questions. It's good. Always inquire from God concerning your challenge. Peter's inquiry made him to experience unusual demonstration of the power of God. He said, when Jesus said, do not be afraid, I am the one. Peter said, if you are the one, then tell me to come. Now it's good that we inquire. It's good that we know. Don't go on blindly. Always ask questions. Even though you are passing through some certain challenges, even though some things has happened, even though you have experienced failure, you need to ask questions so that you can get it right. Don't just go on blindly. Even though there are challenges of life, please, storms of life are there, yes, but don't go on blindly. Ask the right question. Inquire from God concerning your challenge. In Matthew chapter 14 verse 28, we saw what happened. Peter inquired. He told Jesus in verse 20, Lord, if it's you, Peter replied, he said, tell me to come to you on the water. And what other conditions do we need to walk on troubled waters? Focus on Jesus always. Verse 30 tells us that immediately Jesus told Peter, said, come. He began to walk on the waters. But immediately Peter just lost focus. Immediately just, shift his eye and said, oh, the wind is much. And he began to sink. Verse 30, but when he saw the wind, he was afraid and beginning to sink. He cried out, Lord, save me. Now listen to me, child of God. Please focus on Jesus always. The Bible says, looking unto Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith. Focus on Jesus always. Do not let your attention be taken away from Jesus. Our problem is that we concentrate much on our situation. Instead of us to concentrate on Jesus, we concentrate on our condition. Instead of us to concentrate on the solution to our problem, via prayers, via trusting God, via taking action. Sometimes and most times you see us, we capitalize so much on that challenge. We lose focus. We capitalize on our weaknesses, on our inadequacies, instead of turning to Jesus for strength. And so, beloved, I want to encourage you. Turn to Jesus for victory. Turn to Jesus for wisdom. Turn to Jesus for deliverance. Do not lose focus. A lot of times we lose focus. A lot of times we don't concentrate on Jesus. If you want to walk on troubled waters, one of the conditions is for us to concentrate and not lose focus. And finally, have a living faith. Verse 31 tells us, Matthew chapter 14 verse 31 tells us that immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. Jesus said to him, you of little faith, he said, why did you doubt? Please, child of God, reject the spirit of doubt. A double-minded person cannot get anything from God. Please reject the spirit of doubt. Don't be a man. Don't be a woman of doubt. The response of Jesus to Peter's little faith shows us that we need to develop our faith. We need to have a living faith. It's an indication that, if you are faithless, if you are the one who doubts, you will hardly can get something from Jesus. Immediately Jesus reached out his hands and caught him, and he challenged Peter. He said, you of little faith, he said, why did you doubt? A person who wants to walk with Jesus, a person who wants to walk on troubled waters, must have a living faith. You must have a faith that works. Remember what the Bible says. He said, even if your faith is as little as a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, be ye removed. And the Bible tells us that the mountain will respond. Not a physical mountain we know, but that challenge will respond to the word of God. I tell you the truth, no storms of life, no challenge can resist the power of Jesus. Beloved, I want to encourage us today that please have a living faith. Without faith, no one can please the Lord. And as we conclude this morning and go to pray, a lot of times many of us are in Peter's shoes. A lot of us were in Peter's shoes. We concentrate on our troubles. We concentrate on our challenges. We concentrate much more, on things, that particular condition, rather than concentrate on Jesus, who has said, come to me, all you who are heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. Many of us are in Peter's shoes. We don't go to Jesus, who has the solution to our problems and who can rescue us. Number two, I want us to know this as we conclude this morning, that when our faith punctures, it does not mean that we have failed. No. When Peter's faith, falters, he reached out to Jesus. Is somebody listening to me this morning? That, your faith is so small. You are weak in your faith, and you are beginning to get discouraged, and you're thinking, how do I go about it? When your faith punctures does not mean you have failed. All you need to do this morning is to reach out to Jesus. When Peter was walking on the waters and he lost focus and his faith falters, he cried out to Jesus. And the Bible tells us that what did Jesus do? Jesus reached out to him. Jesus held him. He reached out to Jesus and Jesus held him. The one who could rescue him from that challenge. You're here this morning, you're listening to me, or whether you're online and you're listening to us this morning, and your faith is beginning to faint, your faith is so small, or your faith is punctured, will you call upon Jesus this morning? Will you come to him and say, Father, help me, just like Peter cried out? Will you say, Father, save me? Lord, come to my aid. He cried unto Jesus, who could help him. Peter cried out for mercy unto him. And you know what? He was afraid, but Jesus strengthened him. Someone is listening to me this morning, and you have fears all around. You're wondering, oh, how do I go about it? Please reach out to Jesus this morning, and he's here to help you. And the lesson for us as Christians is that God has a purpose for us. And that does not mean that the devil will not try you. No matter how, the devil is not resting. And I want you to know that the devil will try you. And you see, as the devil tries you, that does not mean that the purpose of God for your life will not come to pass. No. The purpose of God for your life will manifest. But you need to stand your ground. You need to develop your faith. You need to reach out to Jesus. You need to cry and ask for help. And you will see what the Lord will do for you. Beloved, do not forget these things, that for you to walk on troubled waters, number one, develop a sense of being alone. You must have value for prayer. You must take prayer as a responsibility, solitude, talking to your Father in heaven. Number two, recognize Jesus in every situation of life. And number two, do away with fear. Do away with doubt. Immediately fear entered inside Peter. He began to sing. Number four, inquire